Welcome to Two-Way, everybody. Thank you for joining, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on the Two-Way platform. Grateful to you for participating. This, to me, has been one of the most intense days of the election. I've had more emails and texts today than I had the day after the debate, the day of the assassination attempt, the day Joe Biden yielded the nomination, the day of the J.D. Vance pick. This selection and the point at which we are in the campaign, for some reason, has yielded an extraordinary amount of interest. A lot of it is the question of whether this pick will matter in the outcome of the race. Republicans are gleefully united. They think this pick is a disaster, not just from their point of view, a missed opportunity, because they really would have been concerned in Mar-a-Lago if Governor Shapiro had been chosen. But they think this is a negative pick, a rare vice presidential pick they believe that will hurt the ticket. And I have to be straight and say, I've heard from a lot of Democrats who say the same thing, not just those who are disappointed for a variety of reasons that Governor Shapiro wasn't chosen, not just because they think it's a missed opportunity. And for the Democratic political class, they thought it was a no-brainer that she should choose Governor Shapiro, but because they think that she took an opportunity to moderate her image, to choose someone from the more centrist part of the party, and instead chose someone whose record is extremely liberal. And so from 9 this morning through the beginning of the rally, which ended just a little while ago, the clear sense I had was a lot of Democratic unhappiness and unified Republican glee. The rally was really good. I don't know how many of you were able to see it. The speeches were well written. They probably went on, in the view of most people, a little bit too long. But they were well written. There was great storytelling. She introduced him extremely well. People really liked his speech. And the whole feel of the thing was very positive and optimistic. And except when she went on a little bit too long, according to one of the donors in the room who texted me, a lot of enthusiasm, the kind of enthusiasm and excitement about a political event that Donald Trump has had a monopoly on in America, for the most part, since 2015. And I think the entire announcement tour will be like that. So it's a little bit tale of two waltzes. Is it the waltz who has disappointed a lot of Democrats who think the Bernie Sanders candidate should not have been chosen by the top of the ticket, who is trying to avoid being tagged as a San Francisco extremist? Or is it the rally, which has really fired up a lot of Democrats and caused one Republican who was gleeful this morning at the selection and thought the Trump campaign would be able to right their ship based on going after the ticket as the most liberal ticket of all time? That guy texted me tonight and said, Trump is in a heap of trouble. Now that's, I think, an overreaction to one rally, although I think they'll be able to carbon copy that and do it throughout. So we have a lot to talk about tonight. And I know there are people on here, including Rabbi David Wolpe, who's joined us, who want to weigh in, and we'll talk about this question of why she didn't choose Shapiro. There's some stories online now that go into that, some of which I've had time to read, some of which I haven't. We talk about that. Why not Shapiro, who seemed like the obvious choice? Gary Kasparov did a series of tweets that said, we'll put those up as long as I'm talking about it. He did some tweets saying, if you're going to beat Trump, you can't play it safe. You've got to go for broke. And he thought Shapiro was the obvious choice, and disappointed and reflected the view of a lot of people. So there's that question of why not Shapiro. There's the question of whether the Republicans are right that Walz is a dangerous pick, that he's not the safe pick, that choosing him allows the Republicans to execute more effectively the exact plan they want to. And it's not about him. It's, again, for the voters, it's pretty clear historically, it's not going to be about him. It's going to be about her judgment in choosing him. You can take the tweet down. The question of defining of him now in the short term becomes an issue. Eventually, it won't matter, probably after the convention, unless something occurs. It won't be about him, but it will in the short term be about her judgment. I want to show you a video in a minute about him. Then I want to talk about the state of the race and how this affects it. I talked to a Republican strategist tonight who's extremely experienced in national politics. And he said, as we were sort of going back and forth about the vice presidential pick, he said, I make Harris the favorite now. And I said, well, tell me what her electoral college path is. And he said, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nebraska. And I said, well, what about the Sun Belt states? He says, oh, I don't think she can win any of those. So that is a familiar path, right? That's the Joe Biden path. And that's a path, if that's your path with no Sunbelt states, that has no margin of error. You got to run the table on those four. And perhaps she'll win and she'll do that. But if we get to September and he's got the four Sunbelt states, and I'm not saying he does, because I think any of them could eventually come back into play potentially. But if that's the circumstance, which is what this person thought, then I don't see how you can make her the favorite. I continue to believe that either of them can win big, or it could be a tight race where obviously either of them could win. I think I'll continue to think that unless something dramatic happens until we get to Labor Day or a little bit beyond. So there's also the question about the debates and whether there'll be any. I think people are pretty interested now in a vice presidential debate, because these are two guys of pretty interesting but different kinds of intellect. And so we're going to talk about all of it. I'm going to bring in a few folks I want to hear from that are lined up to speak. But as always, if you'd like to get into it, particularly if you've never spoken on the platform before, please raise your electronic hand. We'll get to as many of you as we can. This is a platform, for those of you joining us for the first time, for conversations like no other, which in the political space means we're not here to fight or criticize or use invective. That includes in the chat. We're here to learn from each other and to have a place in the country where all voices can be heard and where Democrats can learn from Republicans. This is not a platform only for centrist moderates and independents. It's a platform for everybody. And we love to hear from people on the far left and the far right, because that's how we're going to gain a little bit more of peace, love, and understanding. So I want to bring in a couple folks to start with. And one would be my two-way colleague, Lauren Leader. Lauren, welcome. And now I'm looking for Heather. Here we go. All right. So unmute you both. And Lauren, Heather, thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for having issues.
Lauren, why don't you take over and lead us through the conversation?
Yeah, and Heather, I'm so happy that Heather's here. She joined us completely on faith, having absolutely no idea what two-way was. She started texting me 5 minutes ago, who are all these people and why are they here? I was like, well, I'll explain that later, so thanks for coming on the show. But it's pretty amazing, the turnout tonight. So just really briefly, I had an opportunity to interview Governor Walz. I think it was last week. I've lost track. Last week on Morning Joe, and I've been sort of ancillarily involved in Minnesota politics for a long time. It's part of how I know Heather, who is a state senator until very recently, and now is the Hennepin County Commissioner, right? Hennepin County Commissioner, right? Which is the Minneapolis, St. Paul county, and I'll let her speak to it. She knows the ins and outs of Minnesota politics better than almost anyone I know. But, I got to tell you, like so many of us thought that Walz was bottom of the list. We didn't take him seriously as a contender. And I actually thought that the interview that I did with him on Morning Joe, like completely changed my view of him. He absolutely knocked my socks off. It was really stunning in a very short period of time. And it turns out that a lot of the media that he's been doing, the stuff that's gone viral, really has made a big impact. He still has pretty low name recognition across the country. By some counts, it's 75% of Americans don't know who he is. We experienced that on this platform. Lots of folks who also didn't know who Governor Shapiro was until those national conversations started happening. I will say that I've definitely been hearing a lot of noise from my friends in the Jewish community around this. I think there is, for sure, has been concern that Shapiro was sort of taken out by the far left anti-Israel crowd, and that there is some view that perhaps Harris caved to that. I happen to think that's a really unfair characterization, and I think will prove to be wrong. When she spoke to my friend Rev Al today and to other people I know who spoke to her directly, she spoke about chemistry and a sense of personal relationship. And I also think that his style is one that they are counting on to help bring people together, a spectrum of folks that she may not naturally be able to reach. Particularly some rural voters who have, really been on the outskirts of the Democratic Party for a long time. Last thing I'll just say is that I think the unity is real, despite the sort of infighting that we all have come to read about. There is a very quick closing of ranks around Walz as the choice, a lot of enthusiasm about it. The speeches tonight, very exciting. So I think that the infighting is going to be gone by, very quickly.
Heather,
please, Mark.
Heather, how long have you known the governor? Are you muted again?
Uh-oh, we lost Heather. Are you there?
Go ahead, unmute again,
Oh,
Heather.
no,
Go
she's
ahead.
there. Unmute. Noah, can you unmute? There she
Sorry
is.
about that. Yeah,
That's
no, I was
okay.
just
How long have you known the governor?
so I've known that so the governor and I were elected both in 2018. And so I was in the House of Representatives, actually, just to
Yeah.
Oh,
clarify.
sorry, Heather. Got
No,
it
that's
wrong.
okay. No worries. No worries at all. So I was in the House of Representatives. Tim Walz and I were elected. He was elected governor the same year I was elected into the Minnesota House, and
Okay.
that was in Trump term election.
Okay.
And so, oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Keep going. I'm just wondering if you know the guy, if you can see the screen and see the guy I just brought up for our Minnesota portion here.
Oh, I'm seeing. I haven't seen the Minnesota portion.
All right.
I don't. But
You
I can tell
you
you
keep
more
going.
about Governor
Yeah,
Walz. I'm happy to.
so you're here, and Professor Stephen Shire's here, who I
Oh,
hope
good.
you.
Okay.
I think
Great.
you guys probably know each other because I
Know
do.
of
But
each other.
yeah, okay. But Heather first, and then Professor. I'd love for you to just, like, America's getting to know him. Tell us, charms and warts. What kind of guy is he? What do you think America will be surprised at or learn about him in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, well, I think, one thing when Governor Walz was running, he was running under a one Minnesota ticket, really. He took, I guess, Governor Walz is, I would say, more of a moderate Democrat. Now, I'm sure that kind of played into maybe why he was picked. And I mean, I'll agree with others. I think Governor Shapiro is an amazing pick. And as a Jewish Minnesotan, I was really, in a way, very smitten with the idea of having. Anyways, that's aside. But Governor Walz is beloved in Minnesota. He kind of campaigned on a one Minnesota platform. He ran when it was, so for 4 years, we had a divided legislature where Democrats, we had the majority, and senators had, Republicans had the majority in the Senate. Now, then the last 2 years, we had a trifecta. So we had the Senate, the House, and the governor. And that's when we made massive sweeping change in the state of Minnesota. We made lots of news. And I think this is where, when people start to really look at who Walz is, I think that, I guess somebody had said he's not the safe candidate. Like, what is a safe candidate? And I would say we've done a lot of really great things here in the state of Minnesota over the last 2 years that we can be proud of, that Governor Walz has a lot to talk about.
Heather, I just want to.
Oh, sorry, Mark, can I ask
Yeah.
Heather? Yeah, so Heather, when I had the governor on, I asked him about how he, Minnesota in some ways is like a microcosm of the country, right? You have everything. You have urban, you have rural, suburban, et cetera. Very, very diverse state. What do you think has been his secret to bringing people together behind him, like to gaining that kind of support, pretty widespread support across the state? As you say, it's a trifecta now, but it wasn't always.
He's a really down-to-earth guy. And I think that's really important, to be able to connect with people. I think, and I will always say this, I think the best public servants are not the ones that are like, I'm up here and you're down here. They're right there with you. They're not looking at who's behind you when they're talking to you. He's literally going to look at you, and he's not going to look at the next person that he's going to be having a conversation with. He's got 2 kids that I think just are also incredible human beings. His wife, I have the best story about his wife, and I'm just going to take this moment to tell it to you because I think it's so funny. So I was teaching a policy class at our women's prison, and Gwen Walz, who's a just same kind of very down-to-earth person, comes into the women's prison, and she brings cookies with her. Now, you can't bring, I don't know how many of you are used to prisons in general across the United States. You can't bring baked goods in a prison. Like, you're just not doing that. They let Gwen Walz with her baked goods bring them in because the warden was like, forget it. Oh my gosh, it's the first lady. We have to let her bring the baked goods. And it was for graduation. And so she was known to do that at the Capitol. I wouldn't be surprised when Kamala wins to be our first woman president, that we will expect that from Gwen there as well.
Heather, I want to ask you about something you said, and then I want to ask the professor to weigh in. You said he was a moderate. He's being painted by many as a liberal, and some of his issue positions are pretty liberal. So on what basis do you say he's a moderate?
Well, so when we actually look at what we did in Minnesota, like restore the vote, right? For people that we let out into our communities that are living amongst everyone, but they are not able to vote. People could paint you as liberal, but who says that and whose opinion is it? I guess I would just question, what do we mean by liberal? What is the policy that people are going to say that? Is it paid family leave? Is it at the fact that we pass universal meals that all of our kids can eat in Minnesota without, I mean, I was a kid that grew up on free and reduced lunch. We had tickets when I would go, and it was embarrassing. A lot of us would just not eat lunch. And so if those are the progressive policies or liberal policies we're talking about, I think Governor Walz will do just fine.
Okay. Professor, one of the best political scientists, not just in Minnesota, but in all of the United States.
Thanks
What's your
for
view?
that.
What's your view? Is he a liberal? Is he a moderate? Is he being mischaracterized already?
Well, yeah, I've written a column for U.S. News tomorrow, and my headline is a saying from Sam Rayburn: to get along, go along. And his party has moved left, and he has moved left with his party, particularly in the last 10 years. A quick example will illustrate this. When he ran for the gubernatorial endorsement in 2018, he was considered the moderate option. The endorsed candidate was Erin Murphy, a state representative from St. Paul, who was to his left. Okay, it's 2024. Erin Murphy is now majority leader of the state Senate, and there is no agenda difference between her and Tim Walz, which does illustrate an evolution, I think. And if you do look, as Heather said, at the very ambitious progressive agenda that has passed in the last 2 years, it's gotten praise from Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, and so forth. He's a progressive now. I just don't think there's any other way to say it.
Okay. I want to bring in a couple folks. You guys stay with us and keep joining in. Eleanor Cliff joins us, Eleanor, you've stayed with us on the Veep stakes, and we ended up in a place, I think, by the end you expected, right?
Right.
And Alex Castellanos. So I'd love for you two to just join the conversation and tell us, how do you think it's going so far, less than a day into this, and how do you think, if at all, it will affect the race? Eleanor and then Alex.
I think it's going as well as possibly could be expected. And I think Walz is a terrific pick. And, you know, he is moderate in his demeanor. I think I might have said on the other program you had that put a red cap on him, he looked like he would be at home at a Trump rally. He is comfortable with rural America. He is comfortable with working people. He comes from a past where that is all part of his everyday life. And to characterize what he has done as extremely liberal, and I don't know what policies they're talking about, you know, what breakfasts and lunches for kids, codifying Roe v. Wade is broadly popular in the country. So demonizing him as extreme left just seems to me way out of sync with how people are going to see him. And the Republicans are, in my mind, pretty extreme right. So if this is extreme right versus extreme left, and I don't, again, the Congress is often divided as extreme right, extreme left. The Democrats haven't gone nearly as far to the left as the Republicans have gone to the right. And I think Walz has a unique ability to explain what he's doing in a way that makes sense. And common sense reforms is what he has put in place in Minnesota. And
all right, so two ways for it.
He's a good salesman.
Okay, two ways for education, and you asked how anyone could say he's not a moderate or not a moderate. So here to offer some points of view, Alex Castellanos and Meghan McCain, both who I think have countervailing views of this, and I'd love for Heather and Eleanor and Steve to react to what they lay out. Alex, you want to go first or second? I'll warn you that Meghan has a lot of research.
Yeah, I will leave a lot of the research on Walz to Meghan. Just a couple of things, though. What Republicans are saying about him is, you know, he's sanctuary cities, that he is out there on radical views on transgender issues and children, that he let cities in his state burn down during the riots. And so you're going to see that he is out there. free health care for illegal aliens paid for by people, working class people here who have to pay for their own health care. So you'll see a lot of that. And I think the Bernie Sanders validation of it will ring powerfully. But I thought he was very good tonight. And there are some candidates who are Teflon and some who are Velcro. This guy's got some Teflon. I was taught early on in campaigns by Arthur Finkelstein that there are three kinds of campaigns. Differences on issues campaigns are powerful, but more powerful are differences on ideology. And even the most powerful campaigns are differences on personality. This guy is going to make it very hard to allow himself and somewhat the ticket to be painted as extreme. He's a beer drinking, working class looking guy. And that's going to carry a lot of weight. Look, Kamala Harris can't run an ideological campaign. She'll lose. She can't run an issues campaign. I mean, yes, she's got abortion and yes, she's got gun rights, but the economy's in the toilet. Groceries cost too much. The bread and butter issues, the world's on fire. On the daily issues, it's a real struggle there. And I thought she did something with his help today that was very powerful. Don't go back. Donald Trump said this for about 3 weeks. Donald Trump has one job. That's to keep Kamala Harris from getting to the future. If she's what's next, if she's change, this is a very tough race for him. Don't go back was very strong. And it's not hard, when a candidacy of the left tries to move to the middle with 90 days to go, it's always a 1-2-step process. She's a liberal and she's a chameleon. You can't trust her now. So, and that makes her, that second step, that evolution makes her what? A typical politician, which is the one thing everybody hates. So that's the campaign for Trump. Look, there's nothing new about Kamala Harris and this guy. We've seen this before.
Everything's new about her.
They should run, but again, I'll qualify all that by saying it's going to be, he is a bit of an insurance policy for her because he's stable, he's working class, he's a regular guy.
Yep.
I think in that sense, the liberal sense, he hurts a lot. At the personality campaign, he helps a lot. At the end of the day, in those Midwestern states, in those Rust Belt states, are they going to go for a guy with his agenda and hers? I'm not sure. I would say
I have one sentence to add. I got to add one sentence, which is the Democrats ran on coalition building and on turnout. And it may not turn lots of people who were, right of center towards her, but it almost doesn't matter because Democrats can win on turning out young people, African Americans. The coalition that elected Biden in 20 is what they need to turn out in 24. And he helps with that. And any idea that she's like, that stuff is going to stick. I see them both as Teflon right now and nothing so far has stuck. It could change, but I think part of why is because she is viewed as a once in a generation, the way that Obama was. He will be viewed as, all the things that people in the coalition want in order to make her palatable. So it doesn't matter if Republicans don't like her, if the coalition of Democrats turn out.
Okay, Megan.
Can I add some Minnesota context to this?
Steve, and then Megan with her.
Yeah, let me add some Minnesota context to this. First of all, I do monthly poll analysis for a TV station, Survey USA. It's a good pollster. We've been polling every month. He is the most popular elected official in Minnesota that we poll. He's always above 50% job approval, despite the fact that there have been some really big funding scandals in his administration. And when you poll on a variety of policy issues, often his position is not that popular. So Alex is right about that. There's some Teflon here. But there's another thing to note. We are not one Minnesota. We are two Minnesotas. We are a very polarized state politically. Outside of the metro area, which is about 62% of the state population, it's deep blue. It's as blue as any East Coast city. You've got an expanse of red Minnesota, and I mean Trump land in a big way. Now, when we poll, we find that Walz is extremely popular in the metro, but he doesn't hit 50% anywhere outstate. There's another one thing to note. He won his first election in 2018 by 16 points, and he benefits from having a really dysfunctional state Republican Party that is underfunded and often run by eccentrics. He called central casting for an opponent, really. But in his reelection, despite running against an anti-COVID eccentric doctor, he only won by 7%. And Steve Kornacki on MSNBC today showed the county numbers that, in fact, he lost a whole lot of support in greater Minnesota over a 4-year period, which shrank his margin by more than half over an eccentric and underfunded opponent. So there are a variety of things going on here, but I think Alex is right about the Teflon.
Okay, here's what I want to do. We've got Megan to tell us what she thinks currently about your governor. And then we've got another Minnesotan, Vin Weber here, and Steve and Heather still. So I want Megan to lay out her sense of things. And then I want the three of you to sort of fill in what you think about what Megan's saying, whether she's got a good grasp of this or not. Megan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and unmute again.
Hi. I saw Steve Kornacki on MSNBC earlier, and he was actually breaking down that Governor Walz actually isn't impressive when it comes to rural parts of the country or parts of the state in Minnesota. And he had like a map showing that he basically only wins in urban centers. So there's a myth that he does so well with rural voters. People were asking earlier, like, what's radical about him? I mean, there is a treasure trove of things to go through. One thing that is like really popping up on my social media is that he signed an abortion law that allows abortion up until the moment of birth. And he also signed a bill letting babies die who are born alive after a failed abortion. That's not even legal. You're shaking your head.
Can we fact check that from someone in the state who just left the state legislature, Heather?
No, that is, so first of all,
He's a total moderate on abortion.
well, I'm not saying he's a moderate on abortion, but nobody, you ask a doctor if they're going to kill a baby that's born. I mean, with all due respect, I was a co-author on that bill, and that's actually not true. We can certainly pull up the bill right now. But this is, again, where we start getting into misinformation about what the actual bill does, and then also what physicians will do in medical practice.
Well, could you correct me?
Kill a live-born baby.
Could you correct me? I don't understand legitimately.
Hold on. Congressman Weber, who's been very active in the state and nationally on the right to life.
Yeah, Megan is completely right. I mean, I've known Tim Walz since he first ran for office. I like him as a person. But the championship of abortion rights until birth has been a doctrine with these people. And there's just, I mean, you can walk away from it if you want to, but that is what they believe.
I just think it's false.
Okay,
Megan, it's not based on the facts. What you're saying about Democrats killing live-born babies.
Let's put aside the abortion conversation for just a minute.
Good idea.
And Congressman Weber, you've known him a long time. Just tell America. Let's start over. Just tell people what you know about him. What people should know about what kind of politician he is, what kind of choice this represents.
Okay, thanks very much. Good conversation. He is an excellent politician, and Republicans should not discount that in any way. He represented a marginally Republican conservative district in southern Minnesota. I, at one time, overlapped and represented some of his counties, so I know it pretty well. The Democrats, Nancy Pelosi notably, are pointing to that as the definition of who he is, because he is a good politician, and he represented Steve Scheer's in Congress, and he was
He
good
did.
at talking to moderate and conservative voters for 12 years, and he had good relationships. That's all true. When he ran for governor, he shifted dramatically to the left. The best example is the only issue probably more controversial than abortion. While he was in Congress for 12 years, I had a friend, employee of the National Rifle Association, that said our favorite Democrat in Congress is Tim Walz, and they endorsed him every time. When he started running for governor in the primary, he switched 180 degrees on the gun control issue. Now, I understand that's controversial, but I'm saying that is the emblem of what happened to Tim Walz. He switched and became the most progressive governor in the country. If Democrats are smart, they'll talk about Tim Walz, the congressman. They say, he got along well with Republicans. He got along well with everybody. He represented moderates. If Republicans are successful, they will talk about two things. First of all, they'll talk about burning down Lake Street in Minneapolis, where I have a residence, in 2020, and him watching it happen and defending it happening for 4 days. And then they will talk about, excuse me, Heather, the radical 2023 legislative session in which they enact, which is the most radical left-wing legislative session in Minnesota history.
So here's the challenge we have, because I don't want to spend the whole night talking about him. I want to talk about other stuff.
Sure.
Okay.
You're both very smart. You're both very knowledgeable about Minnesota. And obviously there are going to be some factual questions that we're not going to address tonight, but just the general question of, did he become more liberal in his policy agenda and his policy preferences as governor than when he was in the House? Heather, is that
No
true?
question about that at all, Mark.
I know you think there's no question. Do you agree with that, Heather, that as governor he was more liberal?
Well, I mean, so if we actually then, I mean, take it back to like the civics lesson of how a governor actually is. So it's the House passes the bill, the Senate passes the bill, and then the governor decides whether or not they're going to sign it or veto it, right? If in that matter, we're talking about it in that way, then yes, I'm sure a lot of those policies, because he's taking policies of the elected majorities in what we agree to, and those are the policies in which he is then taking up either on his own.
He has the option of vetoing a bill.
He does, and and I will say this, we pull out a lot of the negative things. Think about what he was dealing with. Progressives in Minnesota have, really struggled with Tim Walz. And so as a more moderate Democrat myself, I will tell you, on the Uber Lyft deal, he did a great job. You're bringing up things where it's only negative. They were I will say Tim Walz has actually been really good when you're thinking about how to weather a storm, when we have really progressive politicians and sometimes in Minnesota where we have to get a solution. He's really been great. And so I think that we can all point out the worst worst things about a person's political career. But I mean, there's a lot of really good things that we're not talking about here.
Well, look, I want to reiterate that I like him as a person, because I always have. But I want to also, short line for the legislative session. For the average person, you got to tell him this. He inherited a $17.5 billion surplus. He spent every penny of it and raised taxes $2 billion. The average person will define that as a radical liberal agenda.
Okay. I appreciate both of you joining. Stay with us. Heather, really hope you'll come back regularly. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Congressman, thank you. Stay with us. I want you to be part of this conversation if you wish, but bring in my friend David Wolpe, who is one of America's leading rabbis. And by leading, I mean funniest, but also smartest and most influential. And David, this is obviously a massive topic, symbolically and politically. And we're not going to unpack the motives of Vice President Harris, but just talk about, some Jewish Americans are very upset today, and talk about why that is and how serious you think this is, or you think this will fade away pretty quickly.
So you framed the question perfectly. And by the way, I will take a second to say I just love these conversations that you've been having the past couple of weeks. They've been wonderful. And for normal voters like me, they've been incredibly informative.
Thank you, David.
I think that, I don't know why Harris chose, and all these people who are claiming that, it's really unfair to think somebody else's motivations. More important, I think, for most Jewish voters is that Shapiro was seemingly the choice, and then there was this avalanche of invective against him. And it wasn't because substantively his position is that different from Walz on Israel, because they've said basically the same thing, both in the far past and recently. So one is a Jew saying it and one is a non-Jew saying it. And that's, I think, what so worries the Jewish community, and especially the fact that there are clearly anti-Israel, anti-Jewish Twitter threads that are celebrating the victory of not having Shapiro nominated. There's a very ugly undertone here that, unfortunately, I mean, having spent this last year at Harvard, as you know, I saw already on the hard left, and is a sort of leitmotif that I think American Jews are pretty concerned about. Now, whether this will continue, I think, depends a lot on what Harris and Walz both say during the course of the campaign. But at the moment, from what I'm seeing on my, emails and texts and so on, it worries a lot of Jews very much.
Yeah, I know there's some donors who are very upset, some who say they're not going to give to the ticket now. Is the worry exist independent of her motives of why she didn't pick him?
I think that some people are imputing bad motives to her. That's
but
let's
assume she didn't pick him because she didn't like him in the meeting.
Exactly, because she liked Walz better.
Yeah. Is there still a problem that Jews would be worried about?
There's a problem with the question of where the energy of the Democratic base is. If part of the energy of the Democratic base is growingly a base that's anti-Israel and derivatively anti-Semitic, then there's a worry. And so I think that's why the campaign will also show not only in what they say and do, but in where the force of the pro-democratic ticket will be. And that's something that I think Jews are going to watch pretty carefully. Are they going to be moved left? Are they catering left on Israel? I'm talking about, are they catering more to those who are unsympathetic to Israel because that's how they're going to appeal to their base better? Right. If so, that's scary.
Could a very skilled Democratic politician who was truly sympathetic to Israel's security and the plight of innocent Palestinians, is that a navigatable position, or is it impossible now?
Well, it's harder than it has ever been, but I think it's navigatable. Although you'll lose, like an ice flow, you'll lose chips at this side and the other, but it's navigatable if I think there is, one of the reasons that Jews will tell you that they were that pro-Israel Jews were felt that Obama wasn't as pro-Israel as, for example, Biden was not only policy, but it was also emotional tone. And emotional tone, fair or not, matters a great deal to people. Clinton, for example, gave you the sense that he loved Israel like in his guts.
Yeah.
And Israel still feels, whatever people think about it, its own self-conception is as a tiny country surrounded by very powerful and ardent enemies, a billion people and 6 million Jews, 7 million Jews. And so I think the tone of the candidate will be tremendously important.
Great. David, thank you. Jump
thank
in.
You.
I'd love to, if you stay with us, I'd love to bring you back if we do get questions about this. Thank you. All right, we're going to go to your questions now. I'll say again, this is an open platform. We want all voices heard. We don't love what some of you were subjected to tonight, and I apologize about that. But we are always going to struggle to be open, with knowing that openness brings some costs. So let me bring in Katie and ask Katie to unmute and tell us where you're calling from, what's on your mind, and who you're supporting in the presidential race. Assuming you're not frozen. There you go.
Hey, Mark, this is Katie's husband, Hunter.
Oh, all right, Hunter. Good to see you, man. So tell everybody where you're from and who you're supporting, and go ahead.
So Katie and I live in Louisiana, and I'm a Trump voter. Katie is, I would say, a reluctant Trump voter. Can you hear me?
And yeah, we can. And what do you want to ask her? What do you want to ask her? Say.
So I was just going to say, I was really concerned that she was going to pick Shapiro, and after listening to Shapiro tonight when he did the speech before the vice president. I thought he did an excellent job, and if she had picked him, I would be really worried. I'm not as concerned about the governor from Minnesota. I think he is very liberal. Just like Meghan McCain insinuated, his policies are extremely left, and so I'm not as worried. I certainly don't think the election is a slam dunk, but I think she does give the Republican Party a little bit of hope tonight that that there is still, a couple of paths to victory.
Yeah. In thinking about the advantages the other side has, you're a Trump supporter. What advantages do you think that the Harris-Walz ticket has tonight going forward? What's
I
one
think
or
they
two
have
things?
enthusiasm and mainly enthusiasm, I think.
Do they have more enthusiasm than your team at this point, or?
Hard to say. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yes, they do. I don't know. I think he is very, very liberal. So I think if we can paint him as a liberal, and if that sticks, I think we'll have some enthusiasm back. I mean, I've been really worried the last couple of weeks. I would have been really, really worried if she had picked Shapiro.
Right. Okay. Awesome, man. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Very grateful to you. All right. Bring in Mr. Hunt. Unmute, please. Tell everybody who you're supporting and where you are and what's on your mind. Go ahead, man. You're unmuted. Nope. Try again. One more time. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All
Again,
right. I just want to say,
remind everybody where you're from, who you're supporting, and go ahead.
I'm from Ohio. I'm supporting Trump. I just want to say I love Meghan McCain. I feel like she's really in touch with culture. I would say that Tim Walz pick was pretty good on both ends. I feel like he reminded me of my football coach. I'm gonna be honest. I've seen the videos of him at the fair. It was I feel like he's really in touch. It's a good pick on the Republicans end too, though, because they can attack him on his progressive views and policies and stuff. I would just say,
but just to be clear, you think it's a good pick and it'll help Harris win?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna be honest. Okay. It depends if Trump can define him before.
What do you besides the fact that he's like a football coach? What do you find appealing about him?
He seems like a witty, smart guy. He seems like he seems like my football coach. I'm gonna be honest. I played football, and he really gave me my football coach vibes. I just like them vibes, I should say.
Okay.
I really wasn't familiar with him until like 2 days ago. So just going off of that. But my question was, do you really think they can get by without doing like a real interview?
I mean, I think they can go a pretty long time. But the press can't force her to do one. And as long as things are going well, I think she'll stay where she is. Eventually she'll have to, but maybe not for a while. Anthony, thank you. Appreciate it, man.
All right,
John, we're going to get some Harris supporters and just haven't yet, but I can't waste the opportunity to ask John Podhoretz, who, like me, has had a roller coaster of the day. This morning we thought this was a disastrous pick, and tonight we were picking the Harris-Walz cabinet. So, John, where are you now?
Well, I just thought it was a really impressive rally, and you have to admit that it's a really impressive rally when you were expecting something else. I thought that it was going to go badly for Walz because Shapiro came out and delivered a stem winder of an introduction and was sort of giving people a taste of what Harris hadn't chosen. And I thought Harris's introduction of him was fluid and well timed. Like, she wasn't letting the crowd interrupt her. She had command of the room. She said absolutely nothing of interest. She had no memorable lines, nothing. She was on script, but that script was banal and just cliche riddled. And I thought he knocked it out of the park. It's one day, it's one appearance. Doesn't matter all that much, but we all, I think, understand that where momentum exists in politics, people say it doesn't matter. But I just remember that, there was a moment when things turned toward George H.W. Bush in 1988 when things were down and he was down, and suddenly he was just, I think I've talked about this before here, he was just sort of winning every day. He was having events and doing things and having fun and winning every day. And she's basically been winning every day, and she won today. And this morning it looked like she might have lost, and she turned it around and won. And meanwhile, and I got to say it, Trump sounds like he needs to be put into a paddy wagon with a straitjacket. I mean, there are things that he said today on Truth Social that are like were bananas about Biden, and Biden coming out and insisting on debating Trump at the Democratic convention. And he sounds crazy, and that's not helpful, because to get to Alex Castellanos's point about what Arthur Finkelstein, the great negative advertising man who created negative campaigning, came up with in the 1980s, Trump has to prosecute an ideological case against Harris. He has to say she's too liberal for this reasons, and Walz hands them that agenda, and Trump stinks at that. He's good at insults. He's good at like throwing people off kilter by saying outrageous and shocking things. But if he actually has to say, you said this, you said that, explain yourself. How could you be for this abortion bill? What do you mean common sense gun? You say you're for the Second Amendment, but you want gun restrictions. I don't believe you want gun restrict. Whatever it is, the case against them is clear. He is not the best person he's the best person to prosecute. You're senile and I should be president because you're senile, but not if you're 60 and I'm 78 and I sound like I'm turning into a guy at the 4:30 early bird special who can't shut up. That's a different kind of old guy than Biden, but he's sounding like an old guy. And that event today had a lot of positive energy, not my positive energy. And I was freaked out this morning, and I was freaked out for the reasons that David Walpe said. And I'm not happy about where this has gone for Jews and in the Democratic Party, but that's where I am. And again, it's one day, and everybody always, this is like bipolar. America has gone bipolar. We are cycling. We are emotionally dysregulated. Every single day, everything has gone bananas. Yeah. And so today was particularly bananas. Yeah. And maybe it'll settle down a little bit, but okay. Yeah. All
right. Two more questions for you, and then we're going to move on. Number one, where are you now odds? Are you 55-45 Harris? That's my guess where you are. I'm guessing you're 50.
I would say, let me go 52-48. I mean, there is a poll. There is an NPR poll out right now.
Yeah, that has Harris up 3.
48.
Yeah.
I'd probably be there, although I think your analysis of the Sun Belt state problem and the fact that everything still runs through Pennsylvania. Yeah. And if it turns out that she didn't pick Shapiro and she loses Pennsylvania by 25,000 votes, that what happened today is going to be the most consequential political event of our lifetime, practically. Yep. So,
and the final question is, am I still booked on the award-winning, critically acclaimed, widely popular commentary podcast tomorrow?
You sure are, and people will be able to hear that probably around 11:30 tomorrow morning when that feed will go up.
If you feel like you're getting not enough of me and John bantering, we switch over to his platform in a few hours. John, thank you always. Delighted to have you here. All right, going to cycle through a lot of folks here. I'm hoping I win the lottery and get a Biden supporter. Antonio, are you a Biden supporter? I'm Biden. Harris supporter.
I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm not a Harris supporter.
Yeah, who are you for? Trump?
I am. I grew up, obviously, as you can tell from the name, I'm Latin. By the way, a longtime listener, first-time caller. Grew up in Deep Blue, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Live in South Florida now, and I'm a moderate Republican.
You live in the free state of Florida.
That's right. That's right. It is the free state of Florida.
You Floridians, you're the easiest to like, because every time I say to a Floridian, you live at least a Republican, they get all excited. All right. So you're for Trump. Were you for Trump in 16 and 20?
I was, and look, I was a John McCain supporter, a Mitt Romney supporter, and you know, if I was running for office, I would not act like Trump. So a lot of times I'm holding my nose and supporting him, but it's about my family, my kids, long term, and pocketbook, national security. I'm very happy with the fact that Harris picked Walz. I mean, you know, I have friends who are independent, typically vote Democrat. They were like, "Oh man, she went for a hardcore liberal." So.
And
shout out to
just,
everybody on here. I love your platform.
All right, let me ask you one question before you go, man. Who's going to win, your guy or Kamala Harris?
You know, here's the question. Here's the question. In the 2016 and 2020 presidential cycle, Trump was trailing by 7 to 9 points to Clinton and Biden, and he came up winning close 2016, losing close 2020. He's neck and neck now polling.
Yeah. Did the Democrats
follow the logic.
Did the Democrats increase their chances by switching candidates?
Yes.
Yes.
But if we follow the logic for the last 2 cycles, why shouldn't it might look like he wins a landslide? I don't know.
Yep. All right. Antonio, thank you for coming. Come back often. All right. Tell us who yours for.
Oh, well, you're going to be surprised. I don't see it very often, but I'm a Kennedy person. So.
All right. You're a Kennedy person. Where do you live?
I currently live in Kansas City, Missouri, but moved here from California. Before that, New York City, where I worked in the Trump building on Wall Street. So I've been in the Democratic bubble for all my life. I've never voted for anything but a Democrat in a national election. And during the pandemic, my partner and I decided to really listen to all sides and start to learn more. And I became more and more sickened by the bubble that I had been in.
Diane, are you more tempted to vote for Harris than you were for Biden, or no?
No. Matter of fact, worse.
What's wrong with as someone who's always voted Democrat? Why isn't she getting your vote?
Well, I don't want to sound too negative, but given that she had a 28% approval rating not that long ago, I found it kind of amusing that my friends who are still in the bubble, and I understand the bubble, are flipping on, oh, suddenly she's great, suddenly we love her. But I looked at her website today. I still don't see anything on policy other than LGBTQ, which is fine, but she's not saying anything else.
Right.
I'm not seeing anything substantive from her.
Yeah.
You know,
Diane, how would you care? What's the bubble like? What happens in the bubble?
Oh my God, the bubble is you must agree with everything that they believe and that I believe. And so all I did was listen to MSNBC and all the main stuff. And I completely believed that they were telling me the truth until I began to get it unwound.
You escaped. What do you like about Kennedy besides that he's not in the blue or red bubble? What do you like about him?
Well, I'm not talking about the past Kennedy, because you can say all the things you want to about his past. Who he is today, if you really listen to him, he's so intelligent. I agree with him on almost everything he believes in. He's in the middle in the sense that he's for abortion rights. So that takes care of that issue, but he's also got common sense about the bureaucracy that's running things. There's just so many things about him I admire. So I just thought I should at least weigh in. I'm an independent now.
Thank you for that. You'll vote for him regardless of his chances of winning?
Oh, absolutely. It's a protest vote, but keep in mind I live in Missouri. It makes absolutely no difference who I vote for.
Last question for you, Diane, and then we're going to bring Mr. Cole in. If you couldn't, whether you voted for Kennedy or not, you got to pick the president. Would you pick Harris or Trump?
If I had to pick between them, I'd hold my nose and vote for Trump. The Democrats, I can just say this one thing, like Bill Maher has said, I did not leave the Democratic Party. They left me. They are way too far left. And I think farther left than the right is even right at this point. So.
Okay. Diane, thank you. Mr. Cole, represent the people.
Listen, I'm a Jewish Democrat, and this morning I was very upset and depressed, but the Walz speech just turned me around. I now think that he's probably a much better pick than Shapiro. And the main thing he said, which I've said to you before, is this is a campaign just suffused with joy. And if you can characterize the Trump campaign, that is the last word that you would identify with. And the other thing is, most of the Jews I know were very much apprehensive about Shapiro being placed on the ticket. They thought it would unleash a lot of anti-Semitism. And frankly, a lot of Jews are very relieved that they don't have to deal with that. And the thing about Walz that surprised me is he didn't get into politics till he was 40 years old. I bet you Shapiro wanted to be president when he was 5. And so, you know, I've turned totally around. I was expecting to be horribly depressed, and now I'm very pleased. I think that she chose the right guy, and he doesn't want to be president, he says. That's fantastic. That means that it's going to be a lot easier if she gets elected to deal with him and all of the associated problems.
So you like his joy and the cut of his jib. Are you concerned that he might be too liberal, or that doesn't bother you?
I don't think it matters anymore. I think that people don't, you know, Democrats are always saying, why do people not pay attention to the issues and their self-interest? And why does the working class ignore issues? Well, everybody ignores issues. If they like somebody, they're going to vote for them. And the fact is, I've compared her campaign to Steph Curry. Even when his team stinks, and I'm a Golden State fan this year, it's just fun to watch him because he plays with such joy. She's just having a lot of fun.
Last question for you. Where are you percentage-wise? Is she 55-45, better or worse?
Oh, I would say 55. Maybe that's a little optimistic. Maybe it's really 54.
Yeah, okay. And if she asked you for one piece of advice to win the thing, what would you tell her to do besides keep being joyful?
That would be it. Just keep on doing what you're doing until it goes sideways. I think Trump's gone crazy. This attack on Kemp, go back and listen to it. It's all about the 2020 election. That's what he really cares about. And people need to deal with that he thinks the election was stolen. And I just don't think that most people believe that. And he's just so angry at Kemp and Raffensperger. It's just weird. And, you know, to overuse a word, I don't think weird is the right way. I think that he's just grumpy. He's so unhappy. He's always unhappy.
Yeah.
Happy versus unhappy. It's a great contrast.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. All right, JJ, come on in. Tell us where you're calling from, who you're for, remind everybody. And
I'm from the great swamp of DC. My vote really matters. I'm for Harris, more against Trump, but for Harris.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to make a couple points. I was really happy with Walz. I'm a moderate, very moderate, but I agree with the last person, Mr. Cole, that I'm not sure policies matter all that much at this point. I wish they did. I said to my partner earlier, if McCain was running again, like that style of Republican, I'd probably vote for him, but that the style of Republican doesn't exist. I'm also Jewish. I didn't understand the whole Shapiro uproar for two reasons. One, if you look at most of the people who are talking about the Shapiro stuff online are Republicans. There are no Republican Jewish senators. There hasn't been one since 2009. There's 9 Republican Democratic Jewish senators, including Chuck Schumer. So to say that the Democratic Party is anti-Semitic is laughable for me. It's really laughable. And then number 2 is, if you look at the past 4 presidential winners, Biden-Harris, Trump-Pence, Obama-Biden, Bush-Cheney, none of those vice presidents came from swing states, and they're all winners. So I think picking someone who is leading the argument of the weird argument is really a political winner versus Shapiro, who's a good politician, seems like a good moderate politician, but it hasn't been so. Picking someone from a swing state matters. So I don't really see why there's such an uproar about it, frankly.
Yeah. And JJ, if you were going to give one piece of advice to Trump and Biden, or Trump and Harris, sorry, they both want to win your vote, what would you say to Harris? What would you say to Trump if they wanted to win your vote?
Well, Trump would have to get a lobotomy, if we're being honest.
Okay.
Harris, honestly, I think she has to move to the middle, like continue to move to the middle. Try to talk about policy and what she's going to do in specific terms, not just, high and mighty, hope and candy.
Right. Okay. JJ, thank you, man. Appreciate you joining. Thanks everybody for joining. Apologize again for some of the intruders. We try to keep as clean a ship as we can, but we're still working on how to make this forum both open and safe. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting, Sean Spicer, Tim Hogan of Minnesota, still on a Minnesota high, will be with you for your 25-minute or so romp through the day. And I will see you almost certainly tomorrow night at a time TBD. Grateful to everybody who joined and spoke and made time, including our Minnesotans, educating us a little bit on the state and on their governor. Thanks for joining Two Way. See you soon.